everybody. Welcome to Fully Endorsed episode. Jesus Christ, we just looked this up. What is it?
34.
34.
We're very professional here, folks.
With me as always is Andres Perez.
Hello, people of the internet.
Today we're here to talk to you about a comedy from the year 1985. A comedy based on a popular board game. A popular board game which John Andres has not played, so that's going to make things interesting. But I am, of course, referring to the cult classic Clue, starring Tim Curry, most notably, but also starring such other comedic talents as Madeline Kahn, Christopher Lloyd, etc. It's a great cast. It's a really stacked cast, actually. They all turn in really solid performances.
As stacked as Colleen Camp as Yvette, the maid.
Yes, incredibly stacked. Yes, right down to Mr. Body, played by an actor who was named Lee Ving, and boy, he left. But yeah.
Seriously, oh my God, you're right. That is his actual name.
Yeah. So, what did you think of Clue, Andres, on the whole?
Well, it was certainly quite an adventure to go through, because it's honestly one of those unique properties that I've never have come across before. If not, I've rarely come across, if ever. It's one of those movies where it's a black comedy, and whenever I think of the term black comedy, my mind tends to go towards something that's either like really raunchy or really sick and depraved or perverted, or even like horror. I even think like horror comedy, something like that Sam Raimi would make, akin to like Evil Dead or Peter Jackson's Dead Alive. But no, this is... Go ahead.
Whenever I hear the term black comedy, I have to remind myself what it means, because my mind immediately, instead of going to like Dr. Strangelove, I'll immediately think like Big Mama's House, and then I go, oh no, they mean black comedy as in dark. Dark.
So right, you know, it's pretty much like akin to, say, Dr. Strangelove, whereas Dr. Strangelove was a movie that definitely had a lot of political commentary, very smart and engaging political commentary. This one here is just sheer entertainment. It's not out to make a big grand statement about society. Rather, this was just like a very high class, very dialogue fueled comedy, the likes of which we haven't seen. I feel like we haven't seen in a long ass time.
Yeah, it's sort of similar to like Airplane. A lot of the jokes are like, if you blink, you can miss them, because it's all just like clever lines that are being exchanged between the characters. And I was a little worried about that watching it together, because we have a tendency to talk while we're watching a movie. Mm-hmm. And if we can watch it with subtitles, that's the ideal. But in this case, we were unable to. So I was a little worried that you maybe wouldn't pick up on some of the jokes. But I think you picked up on most of them, right?
Oh yeah, most definitely. And because it was my first time watching the movie, I didn't retain a whole lot of the dialogue. In fact, I should have just gone up on IMDb and just look up like a bunch of famous lines from the movie. I just remember like the very last ending, where it's like, yes, I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife.
Yeah, that's such a great line, and I feel like I've heard so many other people use that line in the years since,
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's shown up on like Family Guy and stuff like that before. Yeah, it's good stuff. There's so many great lines in this movie. It's one of those movies that every time I watch it, I pick up on another one,
Yeah. Oh, I bet this is just one of those things where you're just going to end up noticing more and more little bits of writing, little bits of writing or character quirks or anything like on repeat. I feel like it's one of those movies that gets better on repeat viewings.
Right, especially like Madeline Kahn, who viewers who are fans of Mel Brooks will obviously know from Blazing Saddles and Frankenstein. She's playing a very interesting character, first of all, and she keeps dropping these great little lines like somebody mentioned something about the afterlife, and she goes, "Life after death is as improbable as sex after marriage." Like, it's just shit like that.
Yeah. By the way, do you think she did? Did they? I forgot. Did they ever said if she did kill her husbands or not?
Yeah, it's pretty clear that she did.
Ooh wee.
Ooh wee. She never comes out. She denies. Well, the only person she admits to killing is Yvette, but that's in one of the endings, which may or may not be canon. So who knows?
Which is a whole other thing that we'll get into later.
That's a great scene too. That's the only line in the movie that's improvised. Mm-hmm. Is when she talks about killing Yvette, and she's like, "I hated her so much. It was like flames on the side of my face." that whole thing was entirely improvised. The rest of this movie was very much by the script. The director of the film, whose name I am blanking on,
Jonathan Lynn.
Right. He came from primarily a theater background prior to this, and so he did something very unusual for film in that they rehearsed this thing a lot, mm-hmm. which typically is not done in filmmaking, at least not to this extent. Mm-hmm. And it shows because this movie is staged very much like a stage show in many respects. There's a lot of having to hit specific marks, and there's a lot of work with especially at the last 20 minutes when Tim Curry
has to explain everything from the last hour, and so they're just running
running back and forth across the Tim Curry deserves a fucking Oscar for this movie.
Just a retrospective Oscar.
He has the most dialogue out of anybody.
Yes, and he steals the show every single time. I gotta wonder, was this the movie that put him on the map, or was he already famous by then?
No, he was already famous by then. The movie that really put him on the map would be 10 years prior to this, when he played Dr. Frankenfurter in the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, and then, okay.
And then he did some other things in between that and this. I'm blanking on what exactly, and then Home Alone 2.
Stolen credit card. Stay in your rooms. I expected him to just turn into that character. Stay in your rooms. We have an insane guest with a gun.
With a gun. Madam, there are hundreds of maniacs out there, armed to the teeth.
That was my very first exposure ever to him.
Yeah, probably mine too. Yeah. And then when she slaps him and he's like, "Do bundle up, it's awfully cold outside."
It's like, ever since then, he's just one of those actors who just kept popping up everywhere I go, and he's since just become one of my favorite actors ever.
Yeah, whenever somebody says they like Home Alone 1 more than Home Alone 2, I'm like, I get it, but no Tim Curry, so slow your roll.
I forgot to mention, so there's one actress, I think, according to Wikipedia, Eileen Brennan as Mrs. Peacock. I kept thinking that was Sigourney Weaver because she looks so much like her.
Interesting. I did not think that. Only because of the year it was made, Sigourney Weaver would have looked much younger than that. But
probably, yeah. I think when I see her,
she's also
go ahead.
She's also a fair bit shorter than Sigourney Weaver. I think Sigourney Weaver is a fairly tall woman.
True.
I think.
It's just that whenever I see her, I'm reminded of Sigourney Weaver from the Ghostbusters movies.
Yeah, sure. I guess. I don't see the resemblance personally, but
fair
all
enough.
Right. You do you.
Sure. We also had Christopher Lloyd here as Professor Plum.
Yes.
It's probably I forgot how often where Christopher Lloyd would play an unlikable character. I'm trying to think. The only thing that really comes to mind, I'm sure there's probably tons of them where, I'm a fucking idiot. He was Judge Doom in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Right. Well, let's clarify here. Christopher Lloyd is never unlikable, but when he plays a morally ambiguous at best character. Not too often. I mean, Judge Doom, probably the biggest example. And in this, he's
the villain from Food Fight, if you remember that. Greetings, Mr. Leonard.
I try not to remember that.
Good.
Perhaps one day we'll cover Star Trek 3 and you can see him play a Klingon. But yeah. But he doesn't play villains terribly often.
Right. But like it is very interesting to see him play like a more like this morally depraved, lecherous kind of individual.
Yeah, and he's not villainous in this movie.
No.
I don't want to make it sound like I'm comparing him to Judge Doom or the Klingon that he played in Star Trek 3. He's just a bit of a dirty old man. He's a bit of a Master Roshi, isn't he?
Kind of, yeah. Only it's not it's kind of played up for laughs, but not really. Because like
when I'm blanking on the actress's name, but she plays Miss Scarlett, and she's wonderful too, by the way. And she says, she has that line where she goes, "I run a telephone service in a hotel that sets up a gentleman with a company of a young lady for a short while." He goes, "Oh yeah," and he walks over with the pen and the pad of paper. "What's the number?"
I remember that now. Yeah, and let's see. There was also, I believe, was it Colonel Mustard?
Yes.
He was the guy who works at the Pentagon with the nuclear secrets. War Profiteer.
And that actor, again, another actor who I blinked on the name, but he shows up in a ton of stuff. He's a character actor. He's in Roseanne a lot. He was the radio host in Jingle All the Way when they show up expecting the action figure, and he's like, "What we have is a gift certificate."
Really? Oh wait, you know what? Sorry, I'm sorry to say that. So Miss Scarlett, yes, it was Miss Scarlett's actress. That's the one who I was thinking looked like Sigourney Weaver.
Oh, okay, you were mixing. Yeah, I can see more
names.
of a resemblance there than with the Mrs. Peacock actress. I thought you had
sorry,
lost your mind there for a moment.
I totally forgot. It's like, I'm looking at the descriptions. It's like the wife of a U.S. senator who was accused of taking bribes. I thought that was Miss Scarlett, but no. Miss Scarlett is the Washington. It was like simply like the wife of someone who worked in Washington D.C. who ran an escort service. She didn't have
a brothel. She runs a brothel and an escort service, and in one of the endings is like a secret stealer.
Someone working for the commie. If she was a commie, she was a dirty commie.
No, she wasn't a commie, Andres. Remember, communism is just a red herring. Like all the members of the oldest profession, she's a capitalist. But yeah, so it was Leslie Ann Warren as Miss Scarlett. That's who I was thinking. Is that Sigourney Weaver or not? I'm sure, like, for the last 5 minutes, everyone's like, "What the fuck are you talking about, Kaiju Noir?" Anybody who's seen this movie is like, Mrs. Peacock looks nothing like Sigourney Weaver.
No, right, yes.
And I'm like,
if anything, she looks like she belongs. If anything, she looks like she belongs on the set of the Golden Girls.
She bears a closer resemblance to Gordon Ramsay than Sigourney Weaver. No, but I'm sure she was a very lovely lady in her youth. Not to say that she wasn't lovely in this, just not what you were describing. No, but the actor who plays Colonel Mustard, he's a character actor who shows up in a lot of things, and he does a great job of playing the dumb guy.
Yes, the bumbling buffoon who just makes everything more complicated than it should be.
His most memorable line in this movie is when he says to Wadsworth, "You're trying to make me look stupid in front of the other guests." And Wadsworth goes, "You don't need any help from me, sir." And he goes, "Right."
Oh yeah, the writing here is just impeccable. And again, I feel like we don't get enough comedies like this, at least these days. I feel like most comedies, it's mostly based on physical comedy or like pot humor or just, gross out raunchiness. I don't know. Can you think of any of a comedy that focused so much more so on the writing in recent years?
I'm sure there must have been one, but no, I can't think of another like really dialogue-driven comedy.
Mm-hmm. Like right now, I'm trying to look up like 2010s comedies. And
you know what happened?
What happened?
The 90s happened. Fucking Adam Sandler came around.
Oh. And
now
Judd Apatow.
Right. And so instead of movies like, meanwhile at the same time you had the movie people,
Mm-hmm.
which the first couple scary movies that were good, and then the Wayans brothers left, and then it was left
Friedberg and Seltzer.
Yeah, so instead of airplanes and clues, we live in a world of epic movies, and The Hangover. Well, The Hangover is a good example. I like the first Hangover. Epic movies and
Melissa McCarthy movies.
Jack and Jill.
Jack and Jill, yeah.
Ghostbusters 2016.
Sausage Party. We got Deadpool. Deadpool was pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah, Deadpool was great, but it was certainly not a dialogue-based comedy.
There's some dialogue stuff in that movie.
I was just saying, it's not all that. Right. It's not until Deadpool 2 where most of the dialogue-based comedy was just mostly focused on references.
Right, like in the first movie when he and Vanessa first meet and they're having their back and forth and stuff. Mm-hmm. There's some good stuff in there.
Sure.
That's probably the closest thing I can think of now that you mention it. Yeah, the Deadpool movies.
Yeah, I suppose maybe Tim Burton's Dark Shadows might be more dialogue based. If anyone remembers that one back in 2013, I think that's when it came out.
I remember there being some decent dialogue in that movie. I don't know if I would classify that movie as a comedy, though. It's that movie feels like it doesn't know what it wants to be.
Right. How about Ted? Ted is a little mixed, but there's some decent dialogue bits there.
Yeah, sure. There's some good stuff in Ted.
Yeah.
You know what?
What?
Eventually, we're going to have to cover the Jump Street movies on this show, and if memory serves, there's some good dialogue-based humor in those. Maybe we were too hard on modern comedy, Andres. It seems like once we think about it for a second, it's not all fucking Melissa McCarthy puking or whatever.
Right. They just happen to be the most prominent. I guess that's the case with any genre. There's bound to, whenever something becomes popular, there's within a particular genre, there's sure to be a glut of them that you would have to shift through to find the diamonds in the rough.
It's not all Kim Ji-young yelling at a camera, Deep Wang. No, be a Clue.
Right.
Where were we on Clue?
We last talked about Colonel Mustard, and that's when we talked about the dialogue there.
Mrs. Peacock is also really good, playing that sort of nervous housewife, early on in the movie, and then in the ending where she turns out to be the killer, that complete 180 that she does is amazing. Throughout the movie, I hadn't thought that much of her, and then when you get to that ending and that switch turns, you go, "Oh, this woman can act."
The tables have turned.
The tables have turned. She plays one of those villains where even though she's a woman, she just feels like a dude. You know what I mean? As soon as she gets the gun in her hand and she's like, "All right, Jack," she just one of those type characters.
Right.
It's yeah.
Let's see. Trying to look for another major character here. Was it? Yes, it was Mr. Green. It was Michael McKean as a Mr. Green, State Department employee who is a closeted homosexual, and in one of the endings turns out to be an undercover FBI agent whose whole entire identity was a ruse.
Right. Andres, did you recognize that actor?
I recognize the name Michael McKean, but I just looked it up right now. It's fucking holy shit! It's Chuck from Better Call Saul. Oh my god.
Yep. Holy
shit, he looks so different.
Well, age.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, it's he looks Yeah. I was trying to think what he looked like, but he kind of reminds me of that one actor from the beginning of Night of the Living Dead, they're coming to get you, Barbara.
Oh yeah, kinda, yeah. In this movie, yeah. You put the glasses on him, I could see that.
Right. And So he was also a fun character to follow as like the more like neurotic, kind of like a little bit like Mrs. Peacock, where he's like the more neurotic, nervous wreck, like a very socially awkward individual. But I guess like given his background for most of this movie, disregarding that ending, I guess it makes sense why he'd be so uncomfortable all the time.
I love whenever, another person winds up dead. He always goes, "I didn't do
it." Or I just remember that one part where Yvette wanted to needed someone to go upstairs with, and all the men volunteered except for him. He was one specifically said, "I don't."
Right. She was like, "Will anyone go with me?" And the other men were like, I will. And he just goes, "No, thanks."
And then he ends up being partnered with her.
Yeah, that was good stuff. And they're both like, she's like, "You go first." He's like, "All right." And then they just stand there for like 5 minutes.
And they just awkwardly, like, just face to face. They're awkwardly walking face to face as they're sideways, like, shimmying up the steps.
Right.
So yeah, anytime he's on screen is also a lot of fun. Let's see, we had I guess leaving as Mr. Body.
He sure did. He left.
The man who's blackmailing the 6 guests, and
he's probably the least compelling actor in the movie, if for no other reason than that he's barely in it.
Right. I mean, is it me, or did he kind of seem like he was trying to do like a pseudo Robert De Niro impression with his role? He kind of looks he looks a bit like a bootleg Robert De Niro.
I was gonna say, I think that's just his face. I think he just looks kind of like Robert De Niro, and so it doesn't really matter how he acts. You're gonna get a De Niro vibe from him,
Yeah. So apparently he's the guy who sets this story in motion by blackmailing all 6 participants, and he was hoping to blackmail all of them for a certain sum of money, but I guess he didn't count on him being murdered, and then that is just the gist of this movie. It's just, who is the murderer, and can they get him before the cops arrive, and trying to, like, at the same time also hide everything from the cops or anybody who shows up and complicates things, because then it looks like they're all involved in the murder of Mr. Body.
Right. You just reminded me of another one of my favorite lines from the movie.
What was that?
When after Mr. Body has been quote unquote murdered for the first time, and Tim Curry is explaining the whole blackmail plot to everybody, and he says, "He hated you all for the same reason he hated my wife. He believed you were all thoroughly un-American." And then a few minutes later, Michael McKean says, "Well, if he thought he was such a patriotic American, why didn't he just turn us into the authorities?" And then Tim Curry goes, "Because he thought he would put his information to good use and make a little money out of it. What could be more American than that?" And then you just cut to Mrs. Peacock, and she gives like this little approving nod. And it's like it's one of my favorite moments in the movie.
Yeah.
It's just that little insert shot of Mrs. Peacock going like, "He's right," like that.
Good call.
It just makes the whole joke.
Right. And so for all this for the rest of this movie, as you mentioned, it's highly scripted, highly staged, set up and staged. You got like this wildly complex system of rooms and passageways and evidence,
all of which comes from the board game.
From the board game, yeah.
The house is set up exactly like it is in the board game. These secret passages are in the board game. I had to explain to you while we were watching the movie, because I remembered you said that you had never played the game.
Right.
The weapons that he gives them are specifically the weapons from the game.
Okay.
A lot of the gameplay centers around going around to different rooms and like searching for evidence, and that's like a huge plot point in this movie, is them splitting up into teams and searching the house. And so this movie does a really good job of just finding a way to work all the gameplay elements into the plot in a way that feels natural.
Yeah.
Unlike something like, say, Battleship. This is the anti-Battleship.
Yeah.
Battleship is the movie that goes, you should not make movies out of board games. And Clue is the movie that goes, well,
maybe you can. And that's like the only example of a good board game movie, I think. And
it's the only one I'm aware of. To be fair, there aren't a glut of board game movies out there. It's not something that's been tried a whole lot, to my knowledge.
I'm still waiting for my Hungry Hungry Hippos movie, god damn it.
I'm surprised nobody's just made a straight-up kids movie, just an animated kids movie out of Candyland. It seems so simple, and it's so simple and straightforward. There's even like a built-in villain, because there's that licorice guy on the board, and he looks shady as fuck, you know? Like,
it's like, hey man, why you gotta judge the licorice people like that?
Look at that man.
What are you saying, man? Are you profiling?
You know what? I hate licorice, all right? I fucking hate it.
I definitely see what you mean. I believe
maybe that's sugarist of me, but licorice. Fuck licorice.
Even the red kind, Dylan.
All of it. All of it. People are like, ooh, Twizzlers. Fuck a Twizzler.
So I believe at one point Adam Sandler was actually going to make a Candyland movie.
No.
Yes. Actually, I'm going to check right now as we speak. Let's see. Film adaptation. Yes. Oh, wow. This goes way back. So in February 2009, Universal Pictures announced plans to film a movie based on the Candyland board game. Ethan Cohen, a writer for comedies Madagascar 2 and Tropic Thunder, was hired to write the screenplay. Kevin Lima, who directed Enchanted, was set to direct. However, in 2011, a new screenwriting team was designated, composed of Jonathan Abel and Glenn Berger. They said, we don't see it as a movie based on a board game, although it has characters from that world and takes the idea of people finding themselves in a world that happens to be made entirely out of candy, where there are huge battles going on. We are going for real comedy, real action, and real emotions at stakes. Essentially, they're trying to hide the fact that it's based on a board game.
We don't consider this movie based on a board game to be based on a board game. We
consider it a real movie with characters and emotions and comedy. By January 2012, Columbia Pictures, Happy Madison, and Adam Sandler were in final negotiations to develop the film, with Sandler both starring and co-writing the screenplay with Robert Smigel. In July 2014, a lawsuit by Landmark Entertainment Group took place over ownership and royalties owned for the characters and storyline introduced in the 1984 edition.
Okay, I'm sending you a link to the picture of the character designs from the version of Candyland that I grew up with, because they keep
which is most likely the version that I grew up with as well.
Because they keep redoing these fucking board games, and they're just making them worse every time. Don't even get me started, to get back on topic, don't get me started on the new editions of Clue, where they've changed the roster. They've changed the rosters of characters. Dr. Orchid, get the fuck out of here. But
oh no, don't tell me they took away Yvette. Tell me they redesigned her.
Yvette's not in the game, actually.
Oh no.
There are a few characters that are added for this movie. There's no Yvette in the game. There's no Cook. But basically all the people that got murdered except for Mr. Body. In the board game, there's just the one more murder, and that's Mr. Body. Anyway, take a look at the Licorice Man and tell me that is not a classic Disney villain right there. He looks like friggin' Jafar mixed with that guy from Pocahontas. Like,
let's see. Oh, yep. I definitely see him right there, man.
That is a clear as day 90s era queer-coded Renaissance Disney villain.
Oh, I was just gonna say, hey man, what if he's just really fashionable? You know, how dare you judge him based on his life choices?
He's a Licorice Man, Andres. It's metaphorical. Anyway.
But yes, you're right. This is the version of Candyland that I grew up playing with. So anyways, I think what makes Clue works as a board game adaptation is the fact that it itself is based on typical whodunit murder mysteries. And so you have
of the kind that were very, very popular back at the time when the board game was released. See, there had been this whole culture of, and these still exist, but they're not nearly as popular as they were in their heyday.
Mhm.
Those events that you go to where they like stage a murder mystery.
Yeah. They used to do those things.
Yeah, the murder mystery, like dinner weekend type deals, which again, those things still exist. You can seek them out. They seem like a fun time. I would definitely go do one if I knew where one was happening.
Yeah.
But they're just not as big of a thing. And the guy who created the board game is a British fellow. He wanted to take that experience and bring it into the home. And so he created this board game, which he called Cluedo because it had some similarities to another game called Ludo. And then he sold that game to Parker Brothers, and then Parker Brothers released it. And in America, they just called it Clue because Ludo wasn't a thing over here. And of course, they're like, new from Parker Brothers. Nobody else made it, just us.
Right.
But yeah, it all goes back to that sort of classic tradition of like Agatha Christie and
a little bit of the old school Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, I'm blanking on the man who wrote Sherlock Holmes' name right now.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Arthur, thank you. Jesus. Yes.
I'm not
your Conan Doyle's.
I'm not a complete simpleton.
Your Conan Doyle's and your Agatha Christie's and that whole sort of genre.
Right.
And really satirizing the fact that if you break down any one of those plots, they don't really make a ton of sense.
Yeah, that is the thing. It's what I find interesting with the film Clue is how they set up so many they set the mystery up in a way where literally anyone and everyone could be the killer. So
to the point where they go out of their way not to kill any of the main cast, except in the one ending where Wadsworth turns out to be the villain and then he dies. But again, there's no Wadsworth in the board game either. So
really,
yeah, none of the main cast from the board game actually bites it in this movie. That's interesting.
Yeah, that is true. I am glad for that, because like all these characters were so great. I was really hoping that this was not going to be one of those movies where the characters are picked off one by one until there's eventually like 2 or 3 left, like a typical horror movie.
Right, they don't make the mistake of making you love these characters and then killing them off. Instead, they kill off new characters that you don't really care about.
Right. Although I did shed a little bit of a tear when Yvette eventually had to bite the dust.
Yeah, she was probably the one that we spent she's definitely the one that we spent the most time, I think, got to know the most. And, you were just said that you weren't going to see those titties anymore. Don't lie to me.
I can't lie. Those were those were indeed fantastic, huge tracts of land.
It becomes such a meme that throughout the movie, people just show up at the house and then get murdered afterwards. At one point, when the doorbell rings, Mrs. Peacock goes, "Oh, whoever it is, they got to go away, or they're going to get killed."
I just love. Okay, I remember my favorite moment ever. I think like they came across Yvette's body, and then just no one reacts at that point because they were just so, they've had it with the murders, they've had it with the constant running and panicking. They're just so emotionally and physically exhausted. They're just like, they see the body and they walk away.
My favorite is when they open the front door and find the singing telegram girl. Yeah. And one of them goes, 3 murders. And then another one goes, that makes 6 altogether. And then Wadsworth just goes, this is getting serious. And then he closes the door.
They didn't even, did they even bother hiding this the telegram girl's body? Or did they just stop at that point?
I think they brought it in after that, but at first they just closed the door.
Oh, I just remembered another of my favorite part where a cop did show up, and so they were trying to hide him, just like locking him in the library or whatever room, and then to hide the bodies, they hid the bodies in plain sight by making it look like some weird, some like what do you call it? What do you call it when just multiple couples just start fucking each other? Was like a swingers deal or something?
I was gonna say, it's not really an orgy per se. It's more of just like a swingers party type deal. Yeah, this is by far the funniest scene in the entire fucking movie.
Yes, I lost my shit with that.
From the time it starts, where the policeman comes out of the room and tells them that Herbert Hoover's on the phone, and they say, "Why is Herbert Hoover on your phone?" And Tim Curry goes, "I don't know. He's on everybody else's phone. Why shouldn't he be on mine?" to the point at the end where they come back to the room, and he's like, "There's nothing illegal about all this." And Tim Curry goes, "Are you sure?" And he's like, He's like, it's a free country. Didn't you know that? I didn't know it was that free.
I remember that. And then you had like I'm blanking out. Then you had Mr. Green, who's just like trying to look at Wadsworth, trying to give him the sign that it's all okay.
And his reaction, because he was trying to distract the cop, he had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so Mr. Green's reaction to coming in and seeing them
making out with the corpses, yeah.
It's so priceless. And Mrs. Peacock is behind the curtain, making it look like the cook is rubbing Colonel Mustard's back.
Yes, I remember that.
And he comes in and finds the motorist's body, and he smells his breath, and he goes, "This guy's drunk.
Oh, yes.
Dead drunk." And they're just, Miss Scarlett's like, "Dead right."
It was brilliant.
It's so perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, easily the highlight of the movie. Just by far the funniest scene.
Right. It's that scene on top of just like the constant back and forth when Wadsworth is explaining the entire plot up to that point.
Yes. Yeah.
So you were here, and then we all went for there, and then you were here, and that's when I called you, and you went here, and then we all had dinner here. That's when he was here, you were there,
He keeps throwing Mr. Green to the floor.
Yes.
And at one point, Mr. Green goes, "Will you stop that?" And Tim Curry just goes, "No." And he grabs him and throws him in the bathroom.
Yes. And then you were there. But I forgot to finish my last point. So yeah, what kind of makes this movie not make sense in a way is that because this whole mystery was set up to where it could literally be anybody who was the killer, and that plays into the ending. Once the endings come about, it has to be made in such a convoluted way to where, yes, that's the thing. Because they made it look like everybody could be the killer, it's difficult to make it just one person who was going around doing everything everywhere at once. They tried to. Lord knows they tried to make it make sense. And you know what? In the moment, it does make sense because like everything is moving at such a brisk pace is that you're not given time to stop and think, wait a minute, how exactly does this work?
Right. And this is partially a critique of the murder mystery genre as a whole, because there's this big problem where the whole conceit of the genre is supposed to be they give you all the clues and conceivably you, the reader, could solve the mystery yourself.
Yeah.
But inevitably what winds up happening is that they introduce some twist or new piece of information at the last minute to explain everything, and basically it comes to the point where, oh no, I could have never solved this. And so the conceit of the genre is kind of a lie. So it's kind of a play on that, as well as just another play on the board game, because every time you play the board game, you're going to get a different ending. You're going to get a different person being the killer in a different room with a different weapon. You know, there are 6 or 7 characters and just as many weapons and like just as many rooms, and so you do the math on that, and the number of combinations are pretty crazy. This movie thankfully only went with 3.
Now, before we get into that ending, you and I talked about this, where we thought, could this have worked had this was played as a straight murder mystery as opposed to a black comedy?
I think absolutely not. I think they made the right choice making this satirical and making it a comedy.
And as well as like a pseudo spoof of the murder mystery whodunit genre.
Right. I think it's very similar to if I remember the story correctly, I think they began writing it as like a straight movie, and then realized that it should be a comedy. I might be wrong about that, but it's very similar to what happened with Stanley Kubrick when he wrote Dr. Strangelove. He set out to, I'm going to write a serious movie about nuclear apocalypse. Then halfway through, he realized this is really funny, and turned to
nuclear apocalypse. Now that just tickles my funny bone.
It literally is how he learned to stop worrying and love the fun. And he just turned it into this comedy.
I'll let those fail-safe fellows do a serious version.
Exactly. There's a similar thing with Airplane, actually.
Uh-huh.
Airplane is almost a direct ripoff of an older plane crash movie from the 50s.
Hmm.
I forget the name of that movie, but you can go watch that movie, and it's pretty much the same thing, just without all the jokes.
I see.
So yeah, it's an interesting thing. But yeah, I think they absolutely made the right choice in making Clue a comedy.
Yeah.
It also helps you get away with some of the board game antics.
Right.
It's like self-aware, tongue-in-cheek comedy.
Right. And I would also wonder if that was like the idea, the thinking behind the Battleship movie, where it's like, if you try to make a straight adaptation of Battleship, you're just going to have a generic fight between two warring factions at sea. So I guess maybe they thought, oh, let's just go over the top with fucking aliens. And then that's where it lost everybody.
And we'll cast Rihanna.
Yes.
Right, you can't just fucking hire Tom Clancy to make a fucking Battleship movie. Like, just it's like, it'll just be Red October. It's like, yeah, that's Battleship. What do you want? That's the game you chose to adapt. Sorry.
Unless you make you do an airplane's take on Battleship. It's just you just put Leslie Nielsen in a fucking submarine. I think it was alive at that time, maybe.
I say we do the serious medical drama based on Operation, where he's pulling like a literal horse out of a guy's leg, and fucking
Doctor, you're pulling his leg.
He's flatlining. His nose is glowing.
Quick, somebody get me the surgical tools needed to remove the funny bone.
Hands him a giant pair of tweezers. All right,
I'm going in. Yeah. It reminds me of those like parody posters like that came out around the same time as Battleship. So it's like you had all these like dark gritty action-based movie posters parodying that were meant to be based off of various board games. So I'm really honestly glad that never came to be. And
right.
As far as we know, we're still stuck in the middle of the comic book superhero movement. Board games haven't gone anywhere since Battleship, and I think that's for the best.
Right. I have a pitch for how you could do a Mousetrap movie.
How is that? Oh wait, didn't we sort of do that? It was called Mouse Hunt or something?
I don't know, but I know how you could do a Mousetrap. You would have to do it in the 1990s because it would have to be one of those wacky like 90s family pictures.
Yeah.
And what you do is you have a house. It's got a rat. It's got a mouse problem, and you can even go so far as to like maybe the mice talk. That was a thing in the 90s, talking animals, and so you get to see the movie from their perspective. And also the human perspective. And what you do is you have the dad of this family be like a wacky inventor. Think Rick Moranis from the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movies.
Yeah.
And throughout the movie, he just invents these elaborate Rube Goldberg traps to try and catch these mice.
Yeah.
Because the standard mousetrap just isn't working. Damn it. And eventually the mice befriend the kids or some shit, and then they have to like talk their dad out of killing the mice, or I don't know, something like that. Point is, wacky 90s comedy. That's how you do Mousetrap.
Yes. Oh, by the way, I just found the thing with all the movie posters. Trying to see if this was like one artist or not. Let's see here. Looks like, okay, Justin Bryant from Nashville. Hey, he's in your neck of the woods. Graphic designer Justin Bryant from Nashville was the one who turned these board games into like horror style movie posters. So he did them. He did one for Hungry Hippos, a Tim Burton-esque Candyland movie, a Child's Play style Chutes and Ladders, a Saw style Mousetrap, a what's it called? Don't Break the Ice. I'm not familiar with that one. Let's see.
How about a Wolf of Wall Street-esque Monopoly movie?
Oh, you know what? Maybe. I think you could get away with a Monopoly movie.
Yeah. Oh, God. It's too bad that he got canceled because Kevin Spacey would be great as the evil Monopoly man.
Oh, my God.
Who's just taking over the city one block at a time. Eventually at the end of the movie, he goes to jail and does not collect $200.
Like real Kevin Spacey.
Like real Kevin Spacey. I don't think he went to jail.
No, I don't think so.
No.
Hollywood people don't go to jail unless you're Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein.
What you see?
I need to gain the monopoly on the wooden bob so that it can all be mine, you see. You know, now that I think about it, I think Monopoly might have the biggest chance of becoming a movie. I mean, isn't Monopoly arguably like the most popular board game ever?
I don't know about most popular. It might be the most famous.
What other Monopoly game has like a Godzilla edition, a Rick and Morty edition, fucking Power Rangers edition?
That's true. That's true. I saw a Monopoly Jurassic Park edition. I think it was Monopoly.
Huh. Okay.
I saw some board game that had Jurassic Park edition. Oh no, you know what? Actually, I don't think it was a previously established board game. I think it was just a Jurassic Park board game that I saw recently.
Okay.
Point being, Monopoly, they do a lot of different editions. Back in the day, I remember Operation had a Shrek edition. I had that.
Nice.
And they replaced all the normal things that you take out of the body with like gross ogre shit. Candle in the ear and all that.
Oh, shit. Yes. Now I remember that. Yeah. But anyways, so I think the last thing to talk about with this movie are the multiple endings, which we've alluded to multiple times. So,
now, brief explanation, I suppose.
Yes.
This movie has 3 endings.
Yes.
It's like the movie constantly just keeps going, but wait, there's more. But what happened was they wanted to try this gimmick because, I don't know, apparently the William Castle days were not yet dead. So they wanted to try this gimmick where they had 3 different endings to the movie, and they would send different endings to different movie theaters. And the thought behind this was that people would have to go to the movie multiple times in order to see these multiple endings. Mm-hmm. And it went over about as well as you might imagine.
Right. I assume people were pissed off if they're thinking, well, what's the real ending? I was invested in the story.
Right. And so then for the home video editions, they put all 3 endings at the end of the movie, and that's the most common version of the movie now that you will see. There's also a feature on the DVD and Blu-rays of the film where you can have it randomly select one of the 3 endings for you when you watch the movie.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if you find this movie, you're going to be watching all 3 of the endings. Yeah.
So you'd recommend that version? You'd recommend the multi-ending version?
I would. I think it's nice that it leaves it up to interpretation. I like that it presents you with these 3 endings, and even though it says, and the title card for the 3rd one says, "But here's what really happened," I think it's more left up to viewer interpretation. Like, oh, I liked this ending better. I liked that ending better.
Right, and I think you and I, we agreed that the first ending was better, only because it took all the It took all the build-up with the whole FBI, Washington, government, espionage, Cold War era stuff, and pays all of that off.
Yeah, the first ending is also the one that makes the most logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it, which don't, you will drive yourself insane. But if you do that, that's the one that makes the most sense.
Uh-huh.
That being said, the 3rd ending has like the biggest finale with the shootout between Mr. Green and Tim Curry, and then
right,
the police coming in and the whole 9 yards. Like, so that's all good stuff. Yeah, the first ending is the one that logically is the most likely.
Mm-hmm. That is true. It's kind of a shame because ending the second ending with Mrs. Peacock being the one behind it all, that was also it was good. It was funny just because to see her pull that 180 like you mentioned earlier in the review.
Right. Yeah.
But it's got like the least to offer compared to the other 2.
Yeah. It's a good ending. It's
a
good ending. It's just not as good as the other 2.
And the fact is, it just drops a lot of stuff that wasn't built up at all whatsoever.
I like the fact that in her ending, she has that interaction outside with the police chief, who had earlier in the movie been disguised as like the guy who come to the door and be like, it was like the end of the world is near, like one of those type guys.
Right.
He's like, your souls are in danger, and Mrs. Peacock goes, our lives are in danger. You beat and then she slams the door. So
Right.
I liked that she got to have that second like little interaction with him in that ending.
Yeah, it's also kind of funny, like, this whole movie takes place in that mansion, so, like, the moment she's finally free, boom, she's arrested.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah, so, anything left to talk about when it comes to this cinematic adaptation of Clue?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything. We learned a lot. We learned that you can make a good board game movie, as it turns out.
Yes.
We learned that
Tim Curry is the best.
Tim Curry is the best. We learned that good dialogue-driven comedy is something that is sorely lacking these days, and that more movies should look to things like Clue as a template. And most importantly, we learned that communism is just a red herring.
Exactly, yes. And we just because this is Tim Curry, I gotta throw in a spice reference in there for good measure, out of obligation.
Sure.
So here's one last question I would like to ask you. Do you think this board game could be adapted in the modern day? Would it be possible in modern Hollywood to make another Clue movie? And B, would you like another Clue movie to be made?
It's an interesting thing that you've asked me this question, because there has been talk for some time of a Clue remake. And I don't know how to feel about it, honestly. I feel like this is one of those movies that's sort of lightning in a bottle. I don't think you're ever going to be able to recreate it. You're certainly not going to find anybody to step into Tim Curry's shoes.
Right.
So I don't know. That's going to be hard. That's going to be a difficult thing. And then, if they can pull it off, that'll be like the ultimate hat trick, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But
just don't fill it with toilet humor, pot humor, sex humor, a little bit of sex humor, but not too far. It's like, I just know they're going to have to throw in whatever's popular to appease modern day moviegoers.
Right. It's
trying to go for the lowest common denominator.
Right. Honestly, if they got somebody like, and this might seem like too similar to what he's done recently with like Knives Out, but if they got somebody like, if they just hired Rian Johnson, and said like, hey, you want to do the comedic version of Knives Out, and just let him like,
yeah. Or what about Taika Waititi? He's pretty good with dialogue.
Taika Waititi might be able to. Yeah, there's some good dialogue humor in Thor Ragnarok too.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the hammer pulled you off the ground. Yeah, Taika Waititi might be a good choice too. I don't know. Can it be done? I mean, anything can be done.
Yeah. Like, that's what I say about like Power Rangers. Can you make a decent Power Rangers movie? Yes. Can one actually be done? I don't know. Maybe not.
Right. Yeah. Am I confident that Hollywood won't fuck it up? No.
No.
No, sir. No, sir, I am not.
Yeah.
So we'll see, I guess.
Yeah. But overall, I fully endorse Clue, and I'd recommend anybody with a passing interest in black comedies, Tim Curry, or just, the fan of the board game to give it a look.
Right. If you watched Weekend at Bernie's and thought, these antics with this corpse are funny, but I wish they were sexier, watch Clue. Well, what are we talking about next week, Andres? If I'm correct, it's a guest episode, is it not?
Yes, it'll be episode 35, in which we will be inviting our good friend Davis, aka Titan Goji, on the show to talk about 1987's The Red Spectacles from director Mamoru Oshii as part of the Kerberos saga. So it's like this big franchise that he started. That's sort of like takes place in this alternate version of Japan, where it's being run by a bunch of very military, like alternate universe, cyberpunk, militaristic run version of Japan, featuring these really badass Panzer Cop, like heavily armored law enforcement, and so he created this whole franchise with various stories taking place within this universe. And the Red Spectacles is the first of 3 cinematic adaptations, or 3 cinematic takes on this universe. They're not so much based off of, I believe they're not based off of any manga or story. These movies are just more stories within that same universe, from which there are also audio dramas and manga and anime and stuff like that. So we're going to check out The Red Spectacles, a sort of cyberpunk neo-noir film, and I really can't wait to check it out. Also, the fact that it's Mamoru Oshii, one of the most acclaimed creators in the field of Japanese animation, the guy behind Ghost in the Shell and I believe Pat Labor 2, both movies which I've seen and loved. So I really can't wait to finally be exposed to the Cerbero saga with this film.
Absolutely, I'm very excited about this. Much like you with the board game Clue, I know basically nothing, so this is going to be fascinating to delve into. So yeah, tune in next time when we review that. Until then, I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife.
And I'm going to go to work right now. Until then, everybody, I have been Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
I've been Super DM64.
And until next time, everybody, take care.